Hello, everybody. How are we? Thanks for having on Community Conversations. Excited to be your guest host tonight. For those of you that don't know me, Tom Smalley, Lead Advocate for the IOCDF and co-founder of Anxiety and Athletes. Shout out where you're from, where you're coming in from, and say hello for sure. We'll get started in just a little bit. I got some things to talk about tonight for sure. Some really good topics, some good questions also to answer, and looking forward to making sure that we try to get to as many people as possible, and then we're talking as much as possible as a community. So just a reminder, shout out where you're from. Let me know you're here. Definitely want to make sure your presence is felt. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments section of the live stream, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Sydney, hello. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being here with us. Just as a reminder, live streams educational and not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find help to create a trained clinician near you. Again, like the IOCDF is not a crisis hotline. If you are in a crisis or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access that lifeline online at www.988lifeline.org. We want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. We're here to support you guys and support one another in our wonderful OCD community. So this is a broadcast and on several social media platforms and being recorded. So just a reminder to share what you feel comfortable sharing, and let's have a really good time supporting one another. Hi, Phyllis. How are you? Ask some questions. Tell me where you're from. Let me know you're here. I got some good questions here that I can start with to get us going. But one of the questions that we had from some virtual live stream questions that we had submitted, when do you know it's time to potentially switch therapists? It seems like other people getting treatment are getting better and I'm not making as much progress. That's a pretty common thing amongst treatment with people that are in treatment for OCD and potentially with the wrong therapists. A lot of times we get therapists that say they treat OCD, but really don't specialize in what OCD requires, what the treatment that OCD requires, which is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called exposure response prevention, ERP, right? And so a lot of times you'll go to a therapist. I know for in my own case, I went to 3 different therapists before the one that I found that actually helped me with my OCD. And those 3 therapists were just doing talk therapy. And as much as it's great to talk about what's going on, we know that OCD doesn't get any better by just talking about it. We need to take real action and actually do exposure work that breaks that anxiety cycle. So it's important to to look at the progress you're making in therapy and ask yourself, do I feel more confident to fight OCD every day on my own, right? If you're leaving the therapist's office or the clinic and you don't feel like you have any tools to fight OCD on your own, then that therapist might not be a great fit for you, or they might not actually specialize in OCD treatment, in ERP. And so a main thing to look for when you're looking for a therapist is to really make sure that you're looking for ERP specialists and not just, have worked with an OCD patient before. We want to make sure that the person you're working with has really done their due diligence about being trained in ERP and how to use that to fight OCD. California, Ireland, but living in Canada are 2 great places. California seems really nice right now. I'm in New York, and I can feel the winter coming. We just kind of skip in New York. We just kind of skip over fall. It's like maybe a month, and then it's just bitter cold. Another question we got was, how do you work on challenging compulsions regarding exercising? I'm struggling with compulsions while working out, and value the concept of challenging compulsions. However, my compulsions are getting in the way of training and helping others to train. So as a strength and conditioning, as a performance coach myself, I can definitely assist in this. And just like we need to treat every compulsion the same, right? It needs the same exact thing is ERP, right? So coming up with different things on a hierarchy and different tasks that will trigger that OCD response, that the obsessive thought and provoke it, and then letting us sit with that discomfort of the thought instead of acting on it with a compulsion. So whatever compulsion you are doing while exercising, if it's doing a certain amount of reps or doing things for a certain amount of times, whatever it is, right? We want to take that and think of something that will actually make the OCD, the anxiety from the obsession worse, right? So I would cut the set in half and only do 9 reps because 9 is a bad number for me, right? And then all of a sudden you do that enough times and you sit with that discomfort, and then you keep going on with your workout, and you realize that over time that anxiety cycle starts to decrease. I think it's good to value the ability to challenge compulsions, but just, it's important to also remember that, some compulsions are harder than others to fight, right? So that's why we make our hierarchy, and we're able to really kind of cross them off as we go, and we don't need to jump into the most challenging one immediately. We can go from, the top or the bottom and work ourselves all the way up to the top. Definitely ask your questions in the chat if you have any. Cats are cool. It's cool username. After you recover, do you continually do exposures to past themes? That's a really good question. I think so. For myself personally, themes shift pretty frequently. I mean, not just for myself personally, for a lot of people. For example, I had a thought about, uh, you know, cheating on a test and worried that I was going to cheat on a test and get caught. And I was in college, and with college and grad school were over, I didn't really have those thoughts anymore because I was kind of not taking exams. And so my attention shifted more to the workplace with my OCD. I shifted towards the workplace and worried about, do my colleagues like me? Am I doing a good enough job? That kind of thing. So it's important to do exposures with past themes if those themes keep reoccurring. So if you are able to put one away, right? Like, so you are able to maybe, if you're able to maybe combat a thought with a compulsion and that theme kind of dissipates a little bit, right? You might not have to go back to that theme and bring it back up if the obsession isn't dragging you down as much. But if that theme keeps coming back, we should go back to it and attack that exposure response therapy the same, because we don't want that theme to come back. Just like maintenance work, when I got out of treatment, it wasn't that I just stopped doing treatment, and I still haven't stopped, right? I still do ERP, I still take medication, still do our ERP, and keep up with all of that, because it's super important to not fall back into that OCD trap of letting anxiety and obsessions creep in, causing compulsions to start taking over life again. You may not be able to answer things like this. Hopefully I can, we'll see. But how can you tell when it's good to increase med dose versus just ride some anxiety out? You're right. I mean, technically, I'm not a medical professional. We have clinicians, some great clinician advocates and clinicians on staff that could answer this probably better than me. But for me personally, I think it's important to the biggest thing with that is communication with your medical professional, is telling them how much the anxiety is taking over your life. Are you doing ERP in addition to that med dose, right? So if you're not doing ERP and taking medication at the same time, those two are really the what can really put OCD to a minimum. And so if you're only taking medication, your OCD symptoms might not go away, right? Because the medication is really to alleviate anxiety symptoms in most cases. So it's more of finding the balance between making sure you're doing enough exposure response work, the right med dosage with your medical professional. Riding anxiety out is important in ERP, right? We sit with that discomfort, but that doesn't mean that you should be sitting with discomfort all day, excruciating pain, and not unable to have a daily life. My thoughts on treatment for someone with comorbid OCD, PTSD, MDD. Should one be treated first? Should there be in multiple therapies at once? Myself personally, I had BDD and OCD and depression. So I found a clinician that treated all three of those. And once we treated BDD just like OCD, right? So we had exposure response prevention and therapy with the BDD, and it works the same way. Just the exposures were a little bit different than normal OCD exposures because they were focused around my body, but we attacked it the same way. But I think that's more of a preference thing than anything, and more of communicating with your clinician to make sure that that you have a plan set in stone that you're both comfortable with. Shell, I find I have a really hard time motivating myself to start tasks. Everything is exhausting with the overthinking, funny OCD. I end up being lazy and not liking myself very much. Any advice? Um, Biggest thing I could tell you is also love yourself. All right, you're fighting such an incredible battle, Phyllis. I mean, you know, OCD is hard. It is so challenging. So just know that like you're not lazy. You're actually, and I'm not trying to give you reassurance, but I always felt this way about, my teachers growing up always thought I was lazy because I wouldn't hand in homework. But really, in behind the scenes, I'm fighting double time to try to get that work in. I just was having compulsions that were prohibiting me from doing that work. And so I was labeled in high school as lazy, in college as lazy, but I was really working twice as hard as the average student to try to do that. And so I tell you that because people with OCD are working double time, right? We're fighting all these emotions and this anxiety to try to live a life that's worth living. And it's totally doable only with, the proper treatment and the right things in place. And so just have some self-compassion, keep some self-compassion for yourself, right? I think, you're not always going to be motivated because it really is, it's tough to start, but once you start, you're going to thank yourself. And so the big thing is also with starting is don't make it such a monumental starting task, right? I think it's important to start small and kind of build up from there. The more you can build up, confidence doesn't. You don't start with confidence, and then in anything in life, you don't start with confidence and then go. You go and then start building that confidence in yourself and that belief in yourself. So build that confidence, go and build that confidence, and start small with exposures and start small with tasks that you can start, and then build yourself up, and that confidence will come. Navigating OCD symptoms along with a co-occurring diagnosis feels like an even bigger mountain climb after for so many years thinking it was just OCD. Sorry you're going through that, Evan. I mean, it's especially the fact that you thought it was just OCD and you get another diagnosis. That's super tough. But it's something that is super prevalent. I mean, I have ADHD and OCD, and I found out I kind of was diagnosed with ADHD and depression later on. Depression earlier, OCD, then ADHD, and so it's important to address all three. Don't ignore one or the other. But just understand that sometimes certain situations with a comorbid diagnosis could elevate your OCD symptoms. So, and also different medications for comorbid symptoms. So, for example, I was taking a medication for ADHD that was actually magnifying my OCD symptoms. So, just keep that in mind when you navigate those OCD symptoms and navigate the co-occurring diagnosis. I think it also depends on what the other diagnosis is and how you want to, address that as well. Michelle, I see a 15-year-old son, OCD thoughts telling him that as a white male, he's privileged. He purposely self-sabotages things. He excels in academic sports. Hard to support ERP with teachers, coaches. Yeah, without teachers, coaches support. That's a super tough Wow. I mean, um, I definitely have felt that before. Transparently, I definitely have had that thought. It's more so around um, the fact when something good happens to me, I feel like I don't deserve it, and so because I was already given so much as a white male, so I totally hear what he's saying and hear what he's thinking, and it's right. It's totally irrational, right? An OCD thought. It's totally irrational, but it feels so rational to us. Um, but uh, I think the biggest thing. Oh, I see you have a 504. My teachers don't understand OCD, and he doesn't want to close. He works with therapists, but it's tough in a public school. Um, Michelle, I'd love to talk to you personally. We can definitely chat about as because I'm the co-founder of Anxiety and Athletes. Um, we have a lot of resources on anxietyhandathletes.org about speaking to coaches, opening up to coaches, educating. I'm willing to go to bat for him and talk to his coaches and help them understand what OCD is. But we can definitely help him and help you guys with that. So you can reach out to me. Um, I can have our people give you my email and we can connect for sure. Um, Hi Kim, good to see you virtually. It's definitely and Michelle, it goes without saying. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's incredibly tough um, to try to educate coaches that might not even want to be educated, right? Or want to learn about it. And so I try to just put it out there regardless. And if they want to learn about it, I'm willing to tell them more. And if they don't, then at least now they know. Um, but realize that if you disclose it, they can't ever use that against them. If they do, that's discrimination, right? So I was in a situation where I disclosed my OCD and I was bullied for it in college athletics. And you can't share something that you can't control and be you should be able to share something that you can't control and that's personal without them using it against you for playing time or for not supporting you as much. So we need to make sure that you get that support, and we can definitely get in touch with you, and let's definitely chat. No, I'd love to talk to your son as well. Uh, John, getting a diagnosis for mental illness, you I saw a psychiatrist that a psychologist, sorry, that doesn't specialize in OCD, but can diagnose it. So I think it's very more than possible. It's just finding. I mean, I think really the best way to do it is go on the ICDF website and look at the mental health directory of clinicians we have there, because it definitely it's so vast. You know, it's the best resource I can give. Is it possible to have both OCD and OCPD? I admittedly don't know a lot about OCPD. I would definitely talk to a clinician about that one more than ask it here. I think it's definitely if there was a clinician here, I would say um, definitely ask away. But for me, I don't want to give you false information, so I definitely would say ask a clinician about that. But as we know, I mean, it is absolutely possible to have comorbid diagnosis, right? So, I mean, like I was saying before, I had ADHD and an OCD. So, um, I would assume it's possible, but I can't say for sure. I saw a crazy article in Psychology Today yesterday, about the benefits of OCD, and I could not believe it. And um, I mean, Psychology Today. I mean, you would think they would never publish an article like that, and so it just goes to show, the stigma we're still fighting. Um, I was blown away by it. Someone sent it to me, and I mean, within an hour, the article was taken down, which goes a long way. Um, I think. Oh, I'm getting word from Fran. They actually got the IOCDF actually got that article taken down. So I actually, before, when I was alerted of the article, it was already taken down. So that just shows how, how much we're on it, and I'm really proud of the way we respond to things like that. I think it shows more so anything. We we are very, very good about responding to that. I love the community that vouches for each other, and um, immediately in the comments, this is what OCD is, and then they're providing educational resources about what OCD is. It's a shame an article like that is published, and the fact that a publisher, editor looked at that and said, "Yeah, let's give it a go." It's just beyond me how that happens, but on a Psychology Today website in 2022. But the fact that we were able to get that taken down, and let the community, you know, let the mental health community know that we're here, and we're trying to tell you what OCD really is. It was pretty remarkable about how fast it got taken down, and the ICDF does such a great job with response to misinformation. Uh, how do you cope with life after severe OCD? I found myself severely depressed as a result of what I went through, and find that after using nearly all my energy just to get through survive OCD, I have very little energy left today. I mean, that's a huge, huge common. You're in the common denominator. I know myself after intensive treatment, where I was in the thick of it. I definitely was really struggling with um, finding an identity. Right, I had a lot of trouble with finding an identity, and you know understanding who I was past OCD. For a long time, I just didn't. I didn't really. I was in treatment, so I kind of watched everybody through a lens, and didn't know who I was, and kind of lost my identity, and didn't know what I was interested in, because OCD consumed my life for so long. Even when I wasn't in treatment before that, I was uh, you know 12 to 14 hours a day of compulsions, at least 10 hours a day for anything else, and you're supposed to sleep 8 hours. So you know didn't leave a lot of time to understand who I was as a human being, and who what I believed in, what my values were. We talk a lot about leaning into our values, like Katie O'Dunn says. So um, it takes a while, right? And I think one of the things to remember is that um, to give yourself that patience and that time. Uh, you know, start trying new things. Don't be so hard on yourself if you don't know who you are immediately after treatment. Connect with people that have been through treatment. Ask them about their identity and their journey, and kind of how they found themselves after treatment. And then also, if you need to talk, if you're severely depressed, definitely continuing with therapy, even if it's just, um, you know, even if it's just talk therapy and you don't need the ERP as much anymore. Talking about that depression, and um, you know, addressing those feelings is super important in helping you live a more free life, and able to get up out of bed, and be excited to find out who you are. I'm not sure, Val, if it's you. It says my connection's fine, but I'm in my office at work, so you never really know. Um, I apologize, everybody, if I am freezing a little bit. Is it possible to treat OCD without being on meds? It definitely is possible. Medication is not a requirement. Um, it's found to be highly effective for some, and some people it doesn't work as much. Um, I think what I like to say about medication, what medication has done for me, medication never stopped my OCD symptoms. Um, Medication helped me alleviate that anxiety from my compulsions, from resisting my compulsions. So when I did exposures, that anxiety was decreased because of medication, and that my mood definitely was lifted throughout the day. I think a common misconception about medication is that medication we predominantly take for related to OCD is SSRIs, right, and antidepressants, right. So those are for to alleviate anxiety and depression, not stop OCD symptoms and compulsions, and stop those in obsessive. Sorry, not stop those obsessive thoughts, right. So people take medication and they expect their obsessions to go away, and when their obsessions don't go away, they get frustrated. And really, that medication is going to help us, decrease the anxiety that we feel from those obsessions. After I got a good question. Uh, After ending weekly therapy, do you have any suggestions about how to keep up momentum when the weekly accountability ends? Yeah, I mean it's definitely huge, and for me, um, I still go once a week to therapy just because I need that. I know for myself, I need that accountability. But I, find a therapist that's willing to help you plan out certain homework assignments for ERP. So in the meantime, when you're not in the office with that accountability and that during treatment, you're doing stuff on your own and you have to check stuff off, have a calendar, things like that, where you're scheduled and you hold yourself accountable. You need to find ways to help hold yourself accountable instead of relying on that weekly meeting with your therapist to hold yourself accountable. So the more you can do that, the better. I have done it. Actually, as I started with, for 7 to 8 years of really doing ERP, and for the past year or two, I've had a lot of mental compulsions, and so ACT has been highly successful for me, and it has been a little bit different and a little bit tougher of a concept for me. But ACT, for people that don't know about ACT, it's acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a type of behavioral therapy, um, mindful psychotherapy that helps you stay focused on present moment and accept thoughts and feelings, and move through difficult emotions, instead of kind of dwelling on those thoughts. And uh, it's something that I've had to practice a little bit more than ERP. ERP is very direct, and when you did when you did a very hard exposure, because the anxiety is pretty debilitating and excruciating, and so but it's effective. And so ACT, I think biggest thing is finding things that work for you. Um, if you try ACT and you like it, you should keep doing it. If you don't like it, lean more on ERP, but it's gotten more and more prominent in the OCD community. I know at the conference I went to several presentations and panels on ACT, and I was, really, really, really great information, and I know there's information about it on CDF as well. So. John, if you suspect that you have OCD, it's great to go to try to find a clinician to be formally diagnosed. It might help your recovery and help you, kind of expedite the process of kind of starting therapy. And so I definitely suggest, if you can get to a clinician and, definitely speak to somebody and put the right people in place because you deserve a life that's not held down even, a couple hours a day or, 30 minutes a day by OCD. You deserve a life that's fruitful and, that you're thriving in. Another question that was submitted that I actually, I'm sure my family dealt with quite a bit was, what is the best way to deal with anger when not giving reassurance to loved ones with OCD? Reassurance is super tough and super tough for loved ones too, right? It's not as hard I mean, I'm not a therapist or a clinician, but I would assume it's not as challenging for a therapist because they're trained in ERP, um, and are in, um, you know, are willing to not give reassurance because they know what reassurance does for OCD and how it feeds the OCD cycle. But for a family, especially if they haven't been in a therapy session and don't know about ERP, it's crucial to make sure that that even if your son or daughter is angry at you, um, or your loved one, sorry, is angry at you, whatever it is, that reassurance is only going to make that cycle worse. And so the more you can remember that you're actually doing them, more of a service by not reassuring them, uh, the more you'll be able to kind of step back and not give that reassurance. But I highly recommend to anybody that is having trouble with reassurance with loved ones, go to a session with them, go learn more about OCD, because the more involved you are, and the more they understand that you're trying to learn more about OCD, the less. I know for me, when my mom came to therapy with me, and treatment, it was very, very important for her to know about reassurance. And once I knew she knew what reassurance was, I didn't get as mad and as angry at her for not giving it to me because I knew we were kind of on the same team. So the more your loved one can see you're on the same team and you're actually trying to help, the less angry they probably will be. And yeah, John, a clinician in this case, OCD specialization for a therapist. So a therapist that specializes in ERP and treating OCD, but also a psychologist, any sort of clinician that can formally diagnose you with OCD or related disorders. I'm glad I could help. Anything else you guys want to ask, feel free. We'll go for another 15, 20 minutes. Um, I'm, an open book, and I'm excited to be here filling in for Ethan. So I want to answer as much as I can. Obviously, I'm not a clinician, so some technical questions might be better left for, Liz or Chris, but please, by all means, post away, and I'll try to get to as many as possible in the next 15 minutes. Hey, Jaber, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Caitlin, OCD does suck. I think we can all agree that OCD sucks. There's no doubt about it. But the one silver lining that I say about OCD is that it makes us it makes us such special people and so strong, and brings us such an amazing community together. I don't know any other communities like ours. I mean, it's so remarkable, and the IOCDF has really fostered that environment, and it's been really, really impressive. John, that's a great question. I actually I deal with that myself, so it's something we talk about with anxiety and athletes. Anxietyanathletes.org is something that myself and the IOCDF created about a year ago now, almost 2 years ago now, and so we have a lot of different. Fran just dropped their link in the chat, but we have a lot of different resources on unwanted thoughts when you play sports. And for me, so I'm a competitive Olympic weightlifter. So this weekend I had New York State Championships, and I actually, when I was at New York State Championships, I had to do an exposure. So the biggest competition of the year so far for me, I had to do an exposure where I wore a sock that didn't feel right. So for me, I have just right OCD. I've always had that subtype. When something doesn't, I have to say a certain thought that contradicts my obsession, and it has to feel right when I say it. If it doesn't feel right, then I have to keep going and doing things over and over again in fives. And so when I put on that sock, it didn't feel right. I had to leave that sock on. I couldn't take it off. I had to do that whole competition with the sock on. And I was deathly afraid, that it was going to deter my whole entire performance. I was going to have a terrible performance. And then on top of that, I was afraid that my girlfriend was going to get hurt in a car accident because her side mirror had recently broken, and she was getting a new one, and didn't have a side mirror. So I was worried about her, while also fighting that anxiety, while also competing in my biggest event of the year. So that's where I think ACT can actually be super, super helpful in that mindfulness piece of accepting those thoughts and leaning into that uncertainty, and learning how to accept those emotions and accept that they're there. But the biggest thing is finding your place of focus, and understanding that there's good things with anxiety, but there's also, when it gets too much and those thoughts start creeping in, that it can be very detrimental. So finding your place of focus, and finding a way to do exposures in sports, right, just like anywhere else, is super important. I think sports are also something that people enjoy, and athletics are something people enjoy, so they don't think they need to do necessarily exposures for them. But just like everything else, we need to do exposures for anything that OCD attacks. Yeah, it's just right OCD. It's so much more popular than people think, and it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because you can't explain that feeling. Like, what can I say? It just felt right. Right? It just felt right. Like, I just did it, and it felt right, so I can move on. But all the time, it's not. It's so many over time. I just keep back in that cycle. Excuse me. I feel like I've never met anyone else with just right. What has helped me cope with that just right OCD subtype? I mean, I think the general gist of that is opening up and sharing about it definitely helps, and meeting other people, but then also the same thing is, I know we always harp on it and say it over and over again, and treatment, ERP, but exposures is what help with that OCD, that just right OCD, and understanding that subtype. I think the more you can identify, what that just right feeling is, and what that visual is in your head, or what that thought is, the easier it'll be to address it in therapy and in ERP. For me, it was like I had to have when I did something, I had to have a green check and the letter 5 in my mind. And if I didn't do that, my family was going to die in a car crash. And then I couldn't keep going. So I had to do it over again until I thought something like the green check and the 5. So, super. I mean, I couldn't explain that to you. I mean, like, why do I have a 5 and a green check? But for some reason, those things resonated and made my OCD comfortable and fed that OCD cycle. Got about 10 more minutes. Ask away. I'm happy to share more about just right OCD, anything that you guys want. My voice cracked. I'm sorry. I was coaching for like 3 hours before this, so running out of water. So apologies. Caitlin, I totally agree. OCD is definitely a war, right? It's not easy, and everyone that has it is on a battlefield. But I think what we want you to keep in mind, and I know what I want you to keep in mind, is that it's a battle you can win. I promise you. And I don't really make a lot of promises because I think promises are risky, but I promise you it's a battle you can win, and you can have a life that's, super, worth living, and you're thriving in. But it is a battle, no doubt. Hi, Felice. Stopping the anger. Could you just clarify, like, anger around OCD, anger about ERP? Can you kind of clarify so I can kind of answer that a little bit more specifically for you? Getting angry because of your OCD. Yeah, no, I mean, that's super prominent. I mean, I know I still get angry about my OCD. I think I actually get more angry now than I did, when I was in intensive treatment, because, now I'm once a week in treatment, in that maintenance phase, and I'm like, I hold myself to this standard of like, okay, like I went through intensive treatment. I shouldn't be getting this stuck. I've been stuck for like 2 hours today. Like, a total. Like, I shouldn't have that much time taken from me these days. Like, I went through treatments. I think I get super frustrated, and then my anger comes out more because I'm frustrated about the time that's getting taken away, that shouldn't be really taken away after all the treatment I've done. As when I was in intensive treatment, I kind of expected that time to be taken away, and I was a little bit more kind to myself and celebrated my wins a little bit more because I wasn't having many wins with treatment. So I think it's definitely stopping the anger. I think that's where that mindfulness piece comes in, and identifying those emotions with ACT, I think is super helpful and super applicable there. That's something that me and my therapist have worked on plenty, is understanding where the root of that anger comes from. And is it because of my OCD, or is it because it's stopping me? Is it because my OCD is stopping me from my goals? Um, you know, finding that root of where the anger comes is usually how I address that anger. And Felicia, you obviously, we're friends on Facebook. Feel free to reach out anything you need. I'm here as a resource. John, I totally agree with the late for stuff. I probably had about, when I was in high school, I probably had about like 87 tardies for homeroom my sophomore year because I was always late, and I was labeled as like the late kid that always that was like slacking. When in reality, I was literally just ritualizing and putting my pants on 25 times, and taking them off 25 times, and putting them back on 25 times. So, I looked at the other kids in the class and I was like, "You try that, right? You'd be late too." So, but obviously I can't say that, right? They wouldn't understand. So it's super tough to explain why you're late for things. Then when it becomes a pattern, it's like, no, it's a pattern because I'm trying to stop ritualizing. And so, something I did for that in therapy was on a weekend where I didn't have to be somewhere at a certain time. I got up and acted like I was doing my morning routine and did certain exposures, practice certain exposures throughout my routine. So then when I was in my routine, my morning routine that coming week, I was prepared with those exposures for that week. Got about like 5 or 6 minutes left. So definitely fire away, last few minutes, and let's hear it, and anything you need to ask that you want to ask, don't hold back. While I'm waiting for questions, Michelle, just want to thank you so much for being so transparent. Did you feel stigma in high school? Thank you. No, I mean, it's, I think at this point, I've been advocating for 8 years now with the IFCDF, 7 years with the IFCDF. So, it's something that I think, if I could advocate for a full-time job, I would. It's obviously, advocacy is my life, and I love it so much, and I love being able to help people. Right, the profession I actually work in as a performance coach is all about serving others. Advocacy is all about serving others and helping other people, and that's just what I'm about. And the more and more I can do that, whether it's one person, 20 people, 200 people, 200,000 people, every single person matters just as much as the next. And the more and more we can build this community up, the better. I definitely felt stigma in high school. I think I opened up about my OCD more so in my junior, senior year. And I felt my circle kind of get a little bit smaller after I opened up, for sure. But then you also find out who your true friends are, and who the ones that are there for you through a hard time. So I think there's also value in that, for sure. Hi, Michael. Hope you're doing well too. Let's connect soon, please. Slowing down rituals, and I think that's just all ERP, like physically slowing things down. I don't know the tactic for that, but decreasing rituals is definitely ERP, and making that hierarchy. Um, how can a parent of older teen best support a recent just right diagnosis while a teen works on intensive program and beyond? I mean, it's definitely, take care, John. Thanks for coming on. I think supporting any sort of diagnosis with OCD is tricky and never easy for a parent. And I can't speak from a parent's perspective because I'm 24 years old, but I'm not a parent. But I can tell you from what my parents went through. I feel every day like I held them back, and I know they would never say that, and I know they would say that's their job, and they would do it all over again. But for me, I always felt this sense of a burden, and I felt bad because they sacrificed so much for me, and I'm super blessed for that. But they had to sacrifice a lot for me. But a parent of an older teen best supporting a recent just right diagnosis, I think, is working through an intensive program, is involved in that treatment, and as much as they'll let you, and as much as your team will let you, and as much as you want to be. But the more involved you are, the more it is one unit. The more you can be one cohesive unit with therapy is so important. Well, it looks like we're wrapping up here. Just a few announcements. Tomorrow, joint advocate Cal King and Dr. John Abramowitz for a brand new research roundtable live stream at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. You can submit questions ahead of time on social media at IOCDF or online at iocdf.org/peace of mind. More walks happening this October for the 1 million steps for OCD walk. Visit iocdf.org/walk to find a walk happening near you, and join us as we embrace uncertainty one step at a time. As always, this live stream is one of many. You can see the entire schedule of future live streams at that same website I mentioned before, iocdf.org/peace of mind. You can view recordings of past live streams, Anxiety and Athletes past live streams, and web series, self-plug, on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. There's a bunch of playlists for each different type of live stream. And if you need resources, please visit iocdf.org. I thank you all for being here, and I commend our community for all the good things we're doing for each other, and keep being there for each other, and keep embracing that uncertainty, because OCD is not our identity, right? We are not our OCD. We are a human being with a separate identity that we also have OCD. And just remember that you're stronger than your OCD. Thanks, everybody.